Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something really fascinating, the education paths of Mexico and South Korea.
Yeah,
They started out surprisingly similar in some ways, but ended up worlds apart.
that's right.
So the big question is, how did that happen and what can we actually learn from it?
Well, it's pretty striking when you look back. After the Korean War, say 1953, South Korea was, incredibly poor,
Right.
like one of the poorest countries on earth.
Mhm.
Its GDP per capita was actually lower than Mexico's back then. Infrastructure, totally destroyed.
Wow. And Mexico at that same time?
Mexico was relatively stable. It was growing, starting to build up its industries.
Okay, so completely different trajectory since then. South Korea is now seen as this benchmark for education, for innovation. Mexico faces, well, different kinds of challenges.
Exactly. A huge divergence.
So beyond just the economics, what were the sort of deeper, maybe cultural differences that set them off on these paths?
That's really key. In South Korea, you had this deep influence from Confucianism. Education wasn't just, schooling. It was seen as a moral duty,
A moral duty.
and a way to lift yourself up socially. Teachers were incredibly respected figures. Learning was this lifelong thing, and it kind of pulled everyone together. Families, the state, society, all aiming to raise the educational level.
That sounds like a really powerful force, that shared commitment.
It was. You hear stories, really incredible sacrifices parents made just to get their kids into good schools. It was fundamental.
So how does that compare to Mexico? I mean, there's respect for education there, too, surely.
There is, absolutely. But it hasn't sort of permeated society in quite the same way. With that same intensity, you have more structural inequalities, social divisions, which can make quality education feel, well, more like a privilege for some, not a right for all.
Oh, okay.
And critically, the role of the teacher, unlike in Korea where they were revered, in Mexico, unfortunately, the profession has often been politicized, sometimes even discredited. That's a huge difference.
Right. That makes sense. Okay, so South Korea has this cultural foundation. How do they build on that? How do they translate it into actual strategy and investment?
They were very strategic. Starting in the 60s, the government made a very conscious choice. Link education directly to industrial growth.
Ah,
So
okay.
massive investment in teacher training, in technical skills, in research. It was quite similar, actually, to what Japan did post-World War II.
And you mentioned this idea of education as a project of state.
Exactly. That's crucial. It meant education was treated as this fundamental national priority, almost above politics. Policies were kept going, even when governments changed.
So continuity.
Yes, and reforms based on evidence, not just political whim. It was sustained.
That continuity sounds amazing, but tricky in practice. How did Mexico handle this? You said investment increased, but maybe not in the same way.
Right. Mexico spent more on education, but a lot of it goes to, current expenses, salaries, bureaucracy, maybe not enough into really boosting quality or long-term strategic improvements. And there's often been a weaker link between what schools teach and what the economy actually needs. That disconnect. Plus, as you hinted at earlier, education has sometimes become this area of conflict of dispute rather than that shared national goal you saw in Korea.
Okay, so putting it all together, what are the takeaways? If South Korea could transform itself from devastation, what are the sort of actionable lessons here, particularly for a country like Mexico?
Well, the source we looked at suggests 5 key things. First, really work on the national story. Build up the social value of knowledge again. Lift up the teaching profession. Get families deeply committed.
Okay, the cultural piece.
Second, redirect spending.
Yeah.
Focus it on quality teacher training, continuous development, and more hours for students in school. Real quality inputs.
Makes sense.
Third, tackle inequality head on. Make sure a good education isn't dependent on your zip code. Close those gaps.
Crucial.
Fourth, push forward with practical skills needed now. Things like digital literacy, quality English language teaching. Make education a real engine for social mobility. And fifth, this might be the hardest one, try to create these state agreements. Basically, shield the education system from constant political fighting.
Right.
Protect the long-term vision.
It's quite a list.
Yeah.
But the core message seems clear, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A strategic vision, that cultural buy-in, it really can lead to incredible change, like South Korea showed.
Absolutely. It makes you think, doesn't it? What really jumps out at you when you hear these two stories side by side? And maybe think about how that idea of a long-term vision, that collective commitment, could apply to challenges you see maybe in education where you are or even in other areas entirely.